5 Charlestown in Nevis, or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. With regards to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or a comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when you're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. Your voice in the community, thought that get results. You can also follow our live stream, video stream, on our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio and our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio. Tonight, we have 2 segments with the program, for the program this evening. The first segment, Janet Maloney, Director of the Community Development Department in the Nevis Island Administration here in Nevis. She is here and she will tell you why. Janet, it's good to have you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. Good evening, listening audience.
And let us know, you got some folks with you. Why don't you introduce them, and then we will get into the discussion.
Okay, this evening, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Miss Joy Napier, community activist, and Mr. Michael Maloney, youth advocate, and tonight we'll be discussing the topic, the role the community plays in shaping the political landscape on the island of Nevis as part of the Department of Community Development Month celebration.
As part of the Community Development Month celebration. Yes. We're going to get into that topic, but why don't we expand a little bit here? And let me just tell you before we get into that we appreciate that for a number of years you've always included us in your community development month and program and all that. Yes. And it's good to hear what the young folks have to say about the politics. Yes. And that's what's happening right now. Yes. And that will be happening in the next segment as well. So we will see what happens. Okay, so let's go to the stuff that we have in terms of the Community Development Month.
Okay, to this year we had a late start. As we know, this is a unique year, and so on the 15th we started the month in the middle of May as opposed to the 1st. On the 15th we would have visited the Brownhill Wesleyan Holiness Church and we worshiped there. And now tonight we're having our Let's Talk on Vaughan Radio as usual. We are regular here, and thank you, Mr. Herbert, for accommodating us over the years. And on the 26th of May we are going to have restoration and cleanup project over at a home in Gingerland. And then on the 27th we have Community Development Day, and Community Development Day entails that you in the community do something nice, something good for someone or something in your community, and it's up to you. You can give somebody a flower, a drink of water, help to clean up your surrounding, anything, just listening ear to a friend who might burden with some trouble, anything that you deem fit, necessary for that, you can do that. And then on the Friday, the 10th of June, we have Jumble Sale, and then department trip to St. Kitts. We are still working on our Gospel Explosion. It should have been this month, but it might come in July, and so later on we'll give you an update on Gospel Explosion. Okay, before I go on to the panelists here this evening, I just want to remind you of our motto, our community, our commitment, our concern that has been and is the motto for the Department of Community Development. Okay, tonight one may deem it an interesting topic, the role that we play in shaping the political landscape on the island of Nevis, and I will just want to go through the key terms. Role, A role is a comprehensive pattern of behavior that is socially recognized, providing a means of identifying and placing an individual in a society. We look at community, a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Play mean to take part in. Shaping, 1, give a particular shape or form to. 2, taking a stance or performing a particular action. Political means relating to the government or public affair of a country, and I combine both these word terms. Political landscape, it refers to the current state of things and how they are looking in the future. It also references the current support for the varying parties. Okay, I just want to take a minute to go to the community responsibilities. Community responsibilities are an individual duties or obligation to the community and include cooperation, respect, and participation. The concept goes beyond thinking and acting as individuals to common beliefs about shared interests and life. And a basic community responsibility is voting in election. And I'll stay there for now.
Okay, well, that's interesting to, in how you've put it. And I, at least from my perspective, it is intriguing to me. Joy, are you going to start off? Good evening, and it's good to have you once more.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert, and good evening to everyone who is tuned in. I do want to express my thanks to Mrs. Maloney and the Department of Community Development for reaching out to me. I'm very excited to discuss this topic, and I must say that Community Development Month really fell at a key time for us here in Nevis, given everything that is happening in our political landscape at the moment. So, when we talk about the current state of things and the future, and when I was thinking about this idea of the role of the community in politics, there are a few things that really came to my mind. And the first is that even before we think of community, we have to think of self, because any community is just the sum of its people, of its members. And so when we think about developing our community, we of course have to first think about educating and developing ourselves. And as it relates to politics, that has to do with educating ourselves on the Constitution, on our rights. I mean, I'm sure all of us can quote, verses from the Bible, but how many of us know our Constitution in and out, which is really the Bible that guides us here as we run our country. It also refers to educating ourselves on the candidates, on the issues that are facing us right now, and on making informed decisions, not just decisions that are based on emotion, but educating ourselves on, the real best choices. And then, of course, when we are setting our personal standards, we have to ask ourselves, is this good for our community? Is this good for our country? Or is this just good for me personally? Something else that I would have considered, probably my second point on this topic, has to do with participation. So once we have set our own personal standards, we have to ensure that we are active participants in our democracy and in the political process. And that starts really in our communities. And that starts with activism and work at a community level. Right in your neighborhood, looking at your neighbors. And all politics is really local. It starts in your own village. Now, participation also extends to advocacy. So not only participating in what's happening, but looking at what is needed and advocating for those specific issues. Gingerland might need one thing, whereas Town or Newcastle needs something else. So really learning how to be an advocate. And I think it's an important distinction. We don't all have to be politicians. I think there are too many politicians and not enough advocates right here in our community. And then the third, area that I would like to touch on is setting our expectations. So, we have set our personal standards. we ensure that we are participating. And of course, participation, the most important participation is participating in our elective politics. And, that means going out to the polls and voting. And I was really appalled, actually, to see the statistics from the last elections. I mean, in Gingerland, it was less than 50% voter turnout, and it was even lower among young people. So, participation is one of the key tenets of being a part of a community. We have to participate in our political process. And finally, of course, we have to set our expectations. What we demand from our leaders and our politicians versus what we just accept from them, what we sit back and, say, all right, well, that's the way things are done. And, there's a lot of talk about we want a certain higher level politics, but, let's be honest, we all enjoy the drama and who is posting what and who is abusing what. So, making clear what we demand from our leaders versus what we're just willing to sit back and accept. So yes, I think those are some of the issues I'd like for us to touch on. Those I know are the issues that are facing our community. So I'm very happy to be here this evening, Webbo.
Very, very pleased to have you as usual as well. And I got to tell you that, maybe before this election, before polling day, we might combine this first segment and the second segment that we're going to have one big show, because some of the points that you've just made are very thought-provoking, and I would like some direct responses from the politicians themselves, two of whom we'll be having in the second segment, but we will not be combined. Okay, so let's go to Mikhail. Good evening, and it is good to have you. Your first time here?
Yes, sir.
Let's make sure it's not your last. Okay, so come a little closer to the microphone. Okay.
Good evening, listening audience and fellow panelists. I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity. When the topic was first presented to me, what initially came to my mind was when I heard what role does the community play in shaping the political landscape was, well, we have the privilege of living under democracy. So that means that we have the choice to select who we feel would be suitable leaders from our community. So in my opinion, the political landscape or the community makes up majority of the political landscape. I feel without the community or without the influence of the community, there's no way that the system which we currently live under would be able to operate. However, that's the base of what I wanted to touch on, because looking at it from a sociological aspect, the community's influence on politicians, on the choices they make, on even how they act in today's day and age, is very strong as well. Looking at the political landscape or what it used to be, speaking to people who were back in 1987 when the Concerned Citizens Movement was founded, and early politics on the island of Nevis, people from back then would tell you that it's very different to how it is now. And I think the rise of social media, the ability to transmit your opinion on a larger scale, on a broader scale, reach more people, played a massive role in that. However, I feel that changes in the community itself may have led to certain things we might watch about the political landscape now and call and deem negative. Because as I said, we are blessed with the ability to select our leaders as we live under democracy, but that could be also in a way considered a curse, because in one way or another, politicians will be a reflection of the community, as they are individuals just like us, selected from the community. So if we live in a community that lacks morals and dignity and has been conditioned to settle for less, then the politicians will also lack morals and dignity and would have been subconsciously groomed to perform at a lower rate than what is expected. And it could be switched the other way. If we live in a community where we're generally ambitious and one that craves hard work and progress, then the politicians coming forth will be a reflection of that as well. There would have to be, as the democracy would entail a certain criteria presented by our community that would deem who we consider suitable to lead us. So my views, I think, is a symbiotic relationship where the quality of the community determines the quality of our leaders. And due to the position that we put these leaders in based on our opinion of who is suitable to lead us, we basically decide the quality of our future generations, because the politicians are now in a place to lead or to influence the younger generations coming up. We look at them, we learn from them, and we absorb what they are putting out. So it's a symbiotic relationship. It could be negative, it could be positive, but it comes down to the community, how they view themselves, what they stand for, and the politicians won't have a choice but to follow suit, because we are the ones who select them. That's my view on the topic.
Very interesting view on the topic as well, and very intriguing. And the last part, right? Well, I've made a note here as to whether or not we're going to be in a chicken and egg situation, right? And you had mentioned in your early dispensation something about the fact that we live in a democracy and we're able to choose the leaders. And I want to introduce you to, not suggesting that you don't know, about autocracy.
Okay.
Well, and you ever heard about communism?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so some of those things are going to be the alternatives as we debate whether or not we should have the community, people in the community, selecting the leaders, because in the end we argue and make noise about who we end up with as leaders, and that's the way it's supposed to be. When you have the leaders, as you indicate, it comes from amongst you.
Yes.
So the question is, for you, is as a consequence of that, and if you agree with that, should we then be complaining about the leaders and the leadership that we get?
Well, you know, Webbo, it's been said that the people get the government that they deserve. But at the same time, you know, I really take many of Mikel's points in the fact that our leaders are reflective of our community to some extent. Because if we have a small community like our own, and we have a lot of people who are really disenchanted with politicians on both sides, and are just disenchanted with, they've lost faith with the process of elections. And, you know, the lower participation that we have, because people say, well, I'm not going to vote, it ain't make no difference, whoever I vote for, it's the same thing. But the fewer and fewer people who participate in our democracy, the easier and easier it becomes for our leaders to basically control the populace and control the narrative.
You see, Joy, let's zero in on that a bit, because if we're suggesting that the majority of the people then decide not to participate because they anticipate what they will get is not going to be good enough for them, what does that tell you in terms of, remember we're talking about the majority not participating, and then what about the pragmatism of the same community who has the majority of the people who believe a particular way, and they do not organize, as they say in the United States, you know, when it comes to elections, and they don't organize so that they can do something else different other than just staying out and allowing the minority views which they think is not the ideal view to prevail.
Well, I mean, I don't know what Mika will say to that. I'd love to hear his views as well, but you see, that is where the advocacy and the activism comes into play. That is really where the community, needs to reclaim its power. And that community action, that unity, that coming together to fight for and champion a cause. I mean, the fact that in Nevis that historically has very rarely happened, that's something that we really need to ask ourselves, well, is this something that we need to change as a community?
So it does it not then suggest who we are as a community? We are one community activist. His name is Samuel Williams. He always will give his views he will give short commentary on the varied issues, and he always makes the point that we have a docile society. Now, as a consequence of that, isn't it true then that the politicians or the people who vie for those positions do recognize that? And after all, if you're going to go into something, you're going to run a race, you got to strategize, right? Because the objective is to win. Correct?
Yeah, you're correct.
And then if you have an idea of who's going to vote and who is not going to vote, then you campaign to those who you know are going to vote, because your objective is success.
But you see, Webbo, I wouldn't say we are necessarily docile. When there are issues that really are dear to our hearts, I mean, right now we're facing some real serious issues with our relationship with St. Kitts. When we look in Nevis's history at issues that are really dear to us, then people get upset and people unite and people move and people act. And it is finding this sense of, I don't want to say anger, but finding this sense of purpose, which is really what needs to happen in our community.
Well, that's a very interesting point you make, and I'm going to come to you, Michael, to get your views on that, because Joy made an interesting point, observation. I don't know if it's a fact, Joy, but she says that this issue is now galvanizing persons, and Michael is much younger than I am, and it'll be interesting to hear what is your take on that.
Well, I do believe that I agree with you. The people of Nevis are very docile, and that's from my personal interactions with those around me. I can't speak for everyone, but I do believe we are very docile people, considering the fact that we tend to set our standards a little lower than they should be at, as Miss Napier mentioned before, and we're very quick to accept what I would consider mediocrity.
But if that is so, then Michael, and you in shaping this view, I gather that you maybe not scientifically, but you would have done some polling among your peers.
Of course.
To find out how they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get that view that your peers have, based on your research, because you mentioned something about 1987 when the concerned citizens movement was started. So you started, and you obviously have done some research, and you've talked to other people. Now, does it give you the same trend though? Meaning that what you're seeing among your peers and the youth in terms of their lack of organizing, and the lack of addressing pertinent issues that will affect their future. Do you see, as a consequence, if nothing dramatically changes, then you'll end up just like people like in my age group?
Well, I think my generation we have well, we benefit in a way from a lot of external influence, overseas influence. So even with the situation that occurred, I think 2 years ago in the U.S. with the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement, we took a lot of inspiration from that. I'm not saying we at a point yet where we're vigorous enough to take issues into our hand, because from my understanding, I believe that we're still very docile. A lot of times people by themselves when they're secluded or in the comfort of each other, they have a lot of good ideas. I speak to a lot of intelligent people, a lot of intelligent young people with a lot of good ideas. However, the problem comes from actually going out and expressing those ideas, because Nevis is a very small country and people don't want to be looked at differently or with any sort of bias for their opinion. They fear that. So I think that's another part of the issue as to why I think in a way we're being suppressed.
Suppressed by
what we feel people would think about us.
And let me go even a little further than Mikel has gone. Not only suppressed by, what our thoughts are, but maybe suppressed by a fear of reprisal, whether imagined or real, from politicians on all sides, who might censor what we say and who watch what we do, who might say, oh, you support this party, you support that party, and who label. And, in a small society, I think that is a real fear. But I also want to take Mikel's point and say that this generation is really a woke generation in a lot more senses than I would say previous generations have been. And I mean, we have to remind ourselves that many of our politicians came in as young men. I mean, I think Van Samry was, 29? He was a real young man when he first entered politics. And now if we look at the age of our politicians, they're getting older and older. And, I think that this generation has a lot to say. They have a lot of ideas. They don't necessarily carry some of the historical burdens and fears of the older generation. But I think it's really about impetus, about organization, about, collective action.
Anybody ever heard the phrase, the price of freedom is not free? And the point that Mikel is making and you added on, it is no different to life in general. It has risk, and the greater the risk, the greater, they say, is the reward. Do you not get the impression, therefore, that we probably want these dreams realized, these things achieved, without the risk?
I mean, I think that is, in a sense, part of it. But I think it's also that, many young people now have greater things to lose as well.
Not maybe necessarily. You mentioned Vance Amory, right? And you mentioned the age that he got in on. And maybe it is how we record our history. But if you were to learn, and maybe after this program, you do a little more delve in, it may not be written in books, but if you speak to persons, you would find the great cost that he had to pay. Indeed, he ended up in the Virgin Islands and so on, and you'll hear a lot about people who, because they opposed, then they suffered greatly, right, etc. But they persevered, and some made it through. So in most instances, I would hear people express the same views. They have these ideas. They would like to get into this area or that avenue and so on. I'll tell you something which is very simple, and it might almost go down as a light moment. Here, you might, let's say, you might decide to call me because you're so frustrated because you didn't have any water. And you try the water department. Mark you, this is hypothetical. You notice how I start to apologize? Mark you, this is hypothetical. So, You asked me, Mr. Herbert, could you please put on the radio that we have no water in our area? Okay, that might satisfy you, but then it might be a cost to me, believe it or not. Because the person at the water department now feels maybe embarrassed, and then he spites me. Right? So, what if I decide, me? And I say so. Because when my thinking, they might. So, that is just a little example to tell and to show you that no matter what it is, there's a price to pay for everything.
So, Mr. Herbert, just to turn, you are from the previous generation.
Yes.
Would you believe that this generation is not willing to pay the price?
They're not, in some instances, I don't think they understand that they have to pay the price, right? Because we might not have been passing on the story as it should, as I had mentioned the example that you brought. Maybe we didn't highlight the price that those other people paid to get where they were. So I tell my folks all the time, because I'm realistic and I'm straight to the point, right? It's going to cost you. And sometimes when I use words, even when I'm doing the shows, I say you got to have courage. Even as this political season is coming on, and I'm trying to encourage people to, make your decisions, make your views and stuff like that. And you got to be so careful, because I remember a few years ago, it was real rough, real emotional, real passionate. And I took out a campaign and I said, tone down the rhetoric, right? Look at the issues, the facts. Don't curse people. You call in and you give your points about something, and we just issued a bulletin, and we said, it's normally always that way, but especially this period of time. If you call in tonight, for instance, and you start to say, well, them people you have on there is a crook and so, I cut you off right away. You don't curse people. Now, when you do that, you get a certain segment of the people who say, oh, he like to cut off people. So whatever you do, it is a cost, and you have to have courage, right? So the young people and the young generation must understand that.
I mean, Mr. Herbert, that same tone that you set here at Vaughan Radio, I think that's the national tone that we need to set for our island.
But who's got the responsibility
to cut off the callers?
To set that tone, Joy, and to make it happen. You see what I'm saying? That is what young people want, right, Mikael?
Yes, sir.
Right, but then who's gonna do it? Who's gonna exercise the courage?
I mean, and you see, that is a part of our community that we really do need to deeply examine. The fact that secretly, a lot of us enjoy the drama, and we enjoy the ray and the voice notes and the videos and who falling out of the chair. We enjoy it.
It comes down to them being a reflection of us.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to politics being a show.
Right, and I'll tell you that in my own view, and having for decades done this is, to me, what I would call a good debate and a good discussion. A lot more people will prefer something more spicy and cussing and stuff like that, right? But I get it where you young people want to head. You don't mind the ray and stuff like that, but you want to go a different path, to a different avenue in terms of the society and discussions and debate. But it's not gonna come just by a wishbone or saying it. You have to have the courage. Now, the other thing, it may seem simple, but I have the courage to say to Mrs. Maloney, I'm going to slot you in with the young folks for tonight. As opposed to, you know how rough the waters is right now with the politics and so on and so forth, right? But folks are going to say, well, we want to hear what this other person and so on. So you have to have people in the society who say, well, listen, they have the courage to say, I'm going to make a space for this, notwithstanding.
Yeah, man. And divisions, we are intelligent people, huh? We recognize substance over hype. And all of us in our small corners, we say it. You know, we say this is a lot of hype and there's not a lot of substance to this.
Yeah, and one of the points you made earlier, Joy, and I think Mikhail probably is on course with it as well, and we probably will discuss it in the second segment when the real politicians come on, is you had mentioned that right now they have an issue that everybody can log on to or rally around. Now, the question is, you see, and the debate is going to be basically around that, and how people rally around it and stuff like that. So we had a discussion here, for instance, one night on that same issue, and one person who called in suggested, you know, in order for Nevis to get that monies, they ought to additionally do A, B, C, and D. So I asked the person the question, why do they have to do A, B, C, and D extra if you agree and there is no issue that it is due?
I mean, the issue that we are facing right now, I mean, it's an issue that has been here ever since the Constitution, ever since 1983. You know, it's an issue that Nevis has.
Joy, let's accommodate this caller and see. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Webbo. Okay, a little girl, right? So,
You see, that's an example that we're talking about. Who's got the courage, right? That fellow, they said right more. That fellow, but I banned him for about a year. Right?
You should have let him speak, man.
No, this little girl here, right?
Don't mind.
Oh well, you see, that's another thing that I'm saying. He called one night and cussed a bad word, right? Now some folks are gonna figure, man, he let him do it. No, because what happens is, Mikhail and others would hear him call in, curse a bad word, right? Express himself. And they'll probably say, well, I'll do that too. But that's a live example of the side. There's a time and place for everything. That fella is my partner. When I see him on the road, it's not a problem. Okay? Yes. So it is in terms of the issue and how it is a long issue in terms of our political history. Hello, good evening.
hey, Webbo.
Yes, it is a long history in terms of our political history, and that's why it resurfaced again, Joy, because it's never addressed in full.
I mean, and this is an issue that really can galvanize divisions, because at the end of the day, as a small country, we're too small to be divided. You know, there are too few of us, too few of, our thinkers, our doctors, our lawyers, etc., to be on either sides of the fence fighting down one another.
It can, Joy, but here's the million-dollar question. Will it? Mikhail, what do you think? You think it will galvanize people as one? The issue.
No.
Joy, there you go.
Not based on what I've seen, how I've seen the reactions I've seen.
Not based on the reality, right?
No.
But theoretically, Joy says it can.
It should.
It should. It should.
It should.
So, what do we do about it? we have a lot of issues, and in both of your presentations you put forth certain things which were good theoretically and so on, and that's the same problem we have even with the Constitution, right? It lays out just like any other constitution, but then you start to spin and twist and so on to achieve a certain desire.
Well, I mean, Webbo, I think this is an opportunity. This is a very unique opportunity. It's an opportunity for our leaders to really show us, that we are putting Nevis first, that we are really interested in representation for Nevis, that, we are thinking about the people of Nevis first. And it's also an opportunity for us to change a lot of things. If we look at our voting procedures, the fact that Nevis is constantly in election cycle, this is a golden opportunity moving forward. We have 2 elections, most likely in 1 year. And what does that mean for us in Nevis going forward into the future? So even if today the change is not coming, it is still a pivotal moment where we can change the course of what Nevis and St. Kitts and our relationship looks like.
We're going to get a good sense of where we are with that, because as I said in the second segment, we have 2 politicians, active politicians, and we're going to see what they say concerning the main issue, which you said that everybody is supposed to be on the same page with. Right? And those are the realities, and I like whenever the discussion comes up that we put the realism in it, because it is always not a problem to give a scholarly description, an account or debate on something. But it was very interesting to me when I said, well, Mikkel, what do you think? And he said, nah, not from what I glean out there. And then I think it was you, Joy, who somebody mentioned about the candidates and how we should examine them, correct? In order to make sure that we make certain types of choices. Somebody said that, right?
Definitely.
Okay. How do we go about doing that? Should we examine their personalities, their contribution, etc., to the society, their professional work, and so on and so forth? What areas, or should it be every area?
I mean, when we look at our candidates, I think that, one of the first things that we need to separate is our candidates as a person, as a personality, versus our candidates as servants of the people, which is what politicians truly are, is, servants of the community. As the person or the people, the individuals who we represent to speak on behalf of the community and work on behalf of the community. And, across the Caribbean, we have this politics of personality, and, we gravitate to the big personalities, and that part of that is just human nature. But we need to learn to separate personality from policy and action.
Well, the last part, you qualified it. Because I was going to ask you, how are you going to do that? Because at the end of the day, when I get into a particular position, even if it's not politics, isn't it true that I get into a particular position, it could be a head teacher, after a couple of weeks or months on the job, guess what comes out? What?
Of course, your personality is natural.
Okay.
It is natural. It is natural.
And then, if that were not examined carefully, and it is not a very glorious thing, then we begin with the issues that Mikkel has, right? We're not satisfied.
I agree, Webbo, but there's a certain way that we do politics here in St. Kitts and Nevis where, we glorify our politicians. We deify them, we treat them with a kind of religious reverence that is really just lifting them up and their personalities up above us as the people. And I think that is also one of our huge challenges as a community, that we lose sight of the fact that the politicians are one of us. You know, and when we give that kind of power, not even to the individual politicians themselves, but just to the status of politician, then we forget that we are the ones who elected the politicians in the first place.
My thoughts on that. What I was about to speak on the fact that we tend to idolize politicians. That's very true. However, aside from that, I think the people of Nevis, because
let's see if this person wants to speak with us. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening.
No, Webbo, please let me talk something, please.
Listen, when tomorrow we'll meet up, we'll talk, okay? Yes, go ahead, Michael.
I think people tend, it's easy to look at a politician and cast the blame a lot of times. But I think a big part of getting to where we should be as a nation is to look at ourselves. I think the people in Nevis need to care more about their country.
Yeah.
Even now, if once again I say it falls back to who we are as a people. That's gonna be reflected through our leaders. Because even now, the way that the situation is being handled, and even how leading up to the general election, the reactions on social media and whatnot, it's like, I think Miss Napier mentioned it earlier, it's like just a show. It's less of a critical decision being made and more of a show. I think we need to care. Instead of looking and trying to pick apart politicians, we need to, in our heart, genuinely care about where we want the island or the federation to go, and then we'll be able to select suitable candidates.
But then, isn't it true then that by our own actions, we are basically showing and saying what we really want?
That's true as well. That's
and
true.
then if we show and express what we really want, and then we get it, should we complain?
Human nature.
Human nature. You know, I get it all the time, and I hear the same discussion and the same desires and the same wants, right? But again, I don't know whether it doesn't come down again to the courage, and then who is going to do it. Are we a society of something needs to be done and somebody ought to do it?
Yes, I just want to interject here. Yes, we have to, the mindset, we have to change. We have to try and work on our mindset and move from dependency to empowerment. And so years of dependency on government and exclusion from decision making have resulted in people feeling powerless. And so you will have that happening, that community members will resort to saying, even when Ms. Napier talked about the decrease in voters, people going out to the poll, some people may ask, what is in it for me? Even if I cast my vote, what am I going to get from casting my vote? And so they just leave it up to other persons to do so.
But here's it, Mrs. Maloney. That question that persons ask themselves, they should also help to provide the answer. Right? No? What is in it for me?
Right.
Shouldn't they also try and provide the answer? Because what is in it for you depends on the decision you make as well. And if you don't want to make the decision because it's too hard, just like the young people who do athletics and stuff like that, some folks are very good and very talented, but they refuse to get up and train every morning and do certain things. Talent alone can only get you to a certain degree.
I mean, well, I think it's also, and as an educator, I'm always going to go back to education. perhaps generations prior to ours sensed the urgency, and they understood more deeply the urgency of being a part of the process, and of having this right. This generation, I don't think that our education system provides them with the deeper understanding, the knowledge of the importance of being a part of this process.
But here's the question I have to ask you, Joy. We are so educated and so brilliant. That in itself should not have provided us the ability to see the con within something that is presented to us?
Yeah, we might be educated, as we say, by our definitions of educated. We might be able to parrot back facts, but can we critically analyze? Can we challenge people? Have we been trained to ask questions? Have we been trained to, stand up and say, well, I don't think this is right?
So then when
explain this to me? No, even it goes back even to our colonial days. We were conditioned as a people to say yes.
But you ever heard the term education is a great equalizer? So when our people, or when we boast how this nation is so educated and how many luminaries we have where that is concerned and so on and so forth, and then we still end up saying this. I heard, I think it was about 5-6 years ago, and the CXC results were out. And I heard the Director General, but the interesting thing, he was leaving at the time. And he basically said what you just said. Our people are not critically analyzing and so on. And before he said that, he spoke glowingly about the passes and how great we were. And then after that comment, he finished up with how great we are. So we are saying things for scholastical. Let's see if this is the same person. Hello, good evening.
Good evening to you and your panel.
Yes.
There seems to be the suggestion that the politicians that we choose are a reflection of our standards, the standards in the community. And that being the case, do you feel that in comparison to the appearance, or our appearance, that these standards have dropped? Once ago, the older folks seemed more prepared to sacrifice for the next generation. Whereas now, I think this generation seems more impatient and want things now, and are less concerned with the methods and more concerned with results. Also with regards to the vetting process for our leaders, shouldn't we concentrate less on the personalities and more on the systems, like the governance systems, which hold all people in power and authority accountable? Because that, in the final analysis, is what is going to bring about the changes that we need. We complain and gripe a lot about our politicians, when in fact it is us not keeping them accountable that is at fault for a lot of the mess that we have.
Okay, I think Joy wants to rip some, but before you go away, you said maybe we should have the systems like laws and stuff like that, we mean?
Laws, regulations.
Okay, well let me just ask you quickly and then I'll go to let Joy respond. So what happens when you have the system, the laws and everything engraved, as one fellow said, in black and white, and nobody studies with them?
When what?
When nobody adheres to them.
Well, if by their very nature, if you have laws and regulations, there should be consequences for not adhering to them.
Okay, all right. Joy, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to the caller, to the earlier point that was made, in terms of the generational change in values and attitudes. And I think, well, I'm sure as far back as mankind have been hearing that my parents' generation was better and my parents' generation, knew better and we did things differently. Really and truly, Mikhail's point holds in that as a society we are constantly evolving. And so our politics and our leaders are going to reflect the direction of that evolution. really who is in control of the way in which our country evolves and the direction that we take, the morals that we choose, is really the young people. We are the ones who are going to chart the course. But we have to bear in mind as well that this is not a blank slate. We inherited a lot from the previous generations. We inherited a lot of very tribalistic politics, and we inherited a constitution that isn't necessarily the ideal document. And I mean, a constitution is a living document, and so I take to the caller's point that amendments and change need to happen.
My input on that part with the constitution, the changes, again, I've been doing this thing a while, and all people keep saying to change the constitution, and I decided once or twice to ask people, okay, so what will you change and what will you put in? And then everything goes sort of blank and silent. And I just made the point because, again, you don't hear a lot of discussion in it. But even this crisis that we have, the Constitution was clear on certain pathways of dealing with certain things. As in, we all remember in 2015 when we had to end up to the Privy Council, etc., etc. All these things, right, were instances where people went contrary based on their view. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Hey, Johnny, I like to hear your voice.
Okay, but based on these things, and even with the voters and voting, and people say, well, you need to change the laws and change the system and stuff like that, Yes, Mikhail, you wanted to get in?
Well, I think when you draw a comparison between the state.
Let me just take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Mr. Herbert, President, good evening to you.
Yes.
I think we used to use this term, we are living in a democratic society, but I don't think we are no more longer living in a democratic society. For example, when this government changed, they said they're going to do integrity of life and everything. No, everybody swayed to it, and up to now, nothing has come out of it. And now we have all these rumbles, everybody saying they said this and they said that, but yet still, nobody did nothing. So, who leading us now, not setting example? So, it leaves to say society have lost its way. Because those who supposed to set the example are not setting example. What those who behind going to follow the same follow suit. Thanks very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Colin, just to respond to that, we are the ones who chose our politicians, and it is up to us to hold them accountable, and it is up to us how much we hold them accountable. And so, I think we cannot keep blaming our politicians. We have to hold ourselves now accountable and ask ourselves, well, what am I doing to change?
And you know what has happened? We are going back to exactly where we began when we made the point. So that is why I had written, is it a chicken or egg situation, right? One of the things, quickly, that I found was interesting in Tortola, what happened there recently with the premier and all that, and then they had to change the premier in terms of the constitution and all that. One of the big issues they have was that there was a commission of inquiry by Britain because, they're not independent. And one of the recommendations was, because of the corruption and all that, was so that they put a stay on the constitution for a couple of years, Britain do direct control, and then they get things back. And there's a raw cost. And I understand, based on some reports out of there, now persons who never used to vote and didn't understand why it was important to vote, now realizing that they're going to be losing that power. And so now they're demonstrating and making noise.
Mr. Herbert, it's interesting. I have a lot of friends and colleagues in Anguilla. And if you look at the voter turnout in Anguilla as compared to Nevis, it is much higher. And if you look at the school system and the education in Anguilla, there's so much education on the history of the relationship between Anguilla and St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right. And Anguilla is a more almost, you can say, militant people. If you go back to remember St. Kitts, Nevis, and Anguilla coming together, Nevis and St. Kitts and Anguilla felt they were not treated well by St. Kitts. What Anguilla did as to both, as opposed to what Nevis did, right? And so there is the history in terms of who the people are. You know, it's so good to have had you on. Maybe with your permission, when we're scheduling for the next couple of weeks, we'll offer an invite. How about that?
All right, Mr. Herbert, I didn't even, before I go, I didn't even mention, but part of the reason I am here is because I am one of the co-founders of the campaign, Dirty Up Your Finger, which is really a youth movement to try to go out into communities and encourage young people and first-time voters to register and encourage people to vote. So just to put that in there, you will be seeing us out in the communities.
Okay, that's good. And you're started already?
Well, we started last elections. We ran a successful campaign last elections, and so we have started meeting and discussing strategies for this election season as well.
But there you go. So that's something that is actually being done, right? Okay, Mikhail?
I'm not sure how much time we have left. But
Yeah, not a lot of time, so you want to give a closing comment.
yeah, I'll close with an analogy based on even with what a caller he calls saying that he's not sure that we still live in a democracy. Here's what I have to say. If you're building a playground, if you hire a builder to build a playground and the builder forgets a couple nails, so he builds a weak playground, but a child goes on the playground and he's on there playing and jumping maybe a little too excessively, and the playground breaks and the child injures himself, who's to blame, the builder or the child who was jumping excessively? You asked earlier if it's a chicken or egg situation. I believe the community is the chicken, because the politicians are a product of our choice. So in order for any change to be made, we must first do some self-reflection, look into ourselves, look into who we are as a people, and hopefully the generations coming after us could be sufficiently educated so that they don't make the same mistakes that we here made today that caused us to be in the predicament, or some people might consider a predicament that we are in today. So I think it comes down to self-reflection, understanding who we are as a people, understanding where we want to go as a people. Stop blaming the politicians. Look at yourself, look at what you stand for, and look at what you want your children and your grandchildren to stand for, and then we could see progression being made, or hopefully we see progression being made.
You think sometimes we want things done, but we don't want to climb the hill or the mountains, that is necessary to get it done?
I mean, Mr. Herbert, the mountain starts with us, huh? That is Mikhail's point. The first step starts with us. And especially this is a critical season. I'm imploring everyone out there, think carefully. Think how much is your vote really worth? Is it really worth that $400? Or what about the future of our country?
Okay. And you said that you think that there's an issue, a main issue around now, that this thing is going to be circulated around. Mikhail didn't agree with you so much that people are on board, and we will, as soon as I get the two politicians seated, I'll start off right there. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Thought That Get Results. Our first segment. Joy Napier is a community activist. Mikhail is a youth advocate and the director of the Community Development Department is Mrs. Maloney, and they are the ones who organize this discussion here this evening. We thank them very much. We thank you very much. And we will be with our second segment right after this.
Builder's Paradise is is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
If you're just joining us, this is Talk That Get Results. We've just finished our first segment, the role of the role that the community plays in shaping the political landscape on the island of Nevis. We spoke with Director of the Community Development Department on Nevis, Janet Maloney, also Joy Napier, who is a community activist, and Mikkel, who is a youth advocate. The second segment. Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the entire listening and viewing audiences. It's a pleasure to be here, Webbo.
The Honorable Spencer Brandy, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and a very pleasant good evening to my fellow panelists, Dr. Bartlett. A very wonderful evening to all those who are listening and viewing this edition of Let's Talk Tonight. It is certainly a pleasure for me to be here. Very interesting first half discussion, Webbo. Certainly enjoyed the conversation. I thought that they had a very wonderful discussion in light of what is happening here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis at this time. Thanks for the invitation, Webbo.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Brand, I have to say I thought exactly the same way. And in the discussion, I've always been having to the forefront of my mind this second segment. And I promised them that I will feed right into it. And I also would like to make a point. It is my view that it is something that is different in terms of the politics and the discussion. So here's where I like to start from where we were at. The two young advocates, Joy Napier, who is a community activist, and Mikkel, who is a youth advisor, they both agreed that there's a central issue for this campaign, at least for the island of Nevis. One was of the view that everybody should have the same view and circle around that particular issue. And then the other person said, that may be so, but that for all practical purposes is not happening. The view, for those who might be just joining us, that they expressed or they advanced was that this, the terminology that some use is a fair share for Nevis, which is the big issue. And that is what they said. The person who gave review said that all and sundry should center around that. And then the other person said that though is not happening. So start off with you, Mr. Brand, and go from there.
Well, this issue of fair share is decades old. We would recall that even the very formation of the Nevis Reformation Party was basically that was one of the bedrock of their foundation. What was in the best interest of Nevis? Fair share, equal share for the people of Nevis. We have seen over the many decades that this has been a struggle for Nevis. And I believe that in all fairness, and I think that, as I think I remember seeing a sign somewhere around here, this is a no spin room. In all fairness, I think at some point in their political history of both political parties have always advocated for the fair share of the people of Nevis. We are now at a point where I feel that this thing have somewhat kind of boiled over into a real, almost like a kind of fist fight that is going on now over this fair share. And I think that the previous segment that we listened to, both of the young persons alluded that this is the main issue, front and center for the island of Nevis. It is a issue that we have seen the virtual collapse of the unity government, and it is an issue that is front and center for the political party which I am a part of. The other party would have indicated that at some point that they basically support the idea and the concept of fair share. But I think, Webbo, that all of the people of Nevis are not necessarily rallying behind that position. And we have seen in the past where Nevis would have taken a position in the best interest of Nevis. And politics and politicians, once they're in opposition, always tend to take a slight, a different position once that position come to the fore. We have seen it in the referendum. NRP would have supported the not the referendum, the secession. NRP would have supported it in the House, and they may have backtracked a bit during the campaign of it, not necessarily rallying and supporting behind the CCM. For some people may argue, oh, they went about it the wrong way, or but I think we are at this juncture, Webbo, where the island of Nevis, the CCM party, is basically clamoring and shouting from the mountaintop that they need a fair share for the island of Nevis. And they appear to be not this 100% rally or 100% support by all Nevisian. I am not expecting that will happen. But I believe that at some point we must all recognize that Nevis is all we have. And if it is that we are being deprived of what is rightfully ours, what is really due to us, then I really see no difficulty with all hands on deck. Interestingly, Webbo, I picked up a post by the gentleman there, Mr. Keynes, supporting the idea of fair share and equal share for Nevis. I think he mentioned something that he's going for the prime ministership, and he would allow Mark Banty to spend the money. But I think that while we are putting those kind of statements out there, I would hope that we can really see the kind of tangible, meaningful and significant support behind this idea for Nevis. At the end of it, the island of Nevis would be the ultimate beneficiary, whether it's one political party in office or the other. I think that the idea and the aim is that we want to see the people of Nevis benefit, and that is the ultimate goal here, Webbo.
Dr. Bartlett?
Webbo, thank you for the opportunity. We have been discussing this, and I don't know that, and I accept what for the younger generation might seem to be the issue. But for myself, fair share is not what I see as a central issue for this election. That is not what I would be necessarily, unless I am asked to go that way, to indulge in those discussions or debates. that is not an issue that I think that I would want to focus on for this election going forward. However, because it is directed that way, the conversation now, I'll participate to this extent. We have been hearing about this fair share, but what I want people to recognize is that fair share really is a creature that was created by the team unity government through a mechanism they call, or they want to call it a document, they call the Charleston Accord. And I consider that an informal way of dealing with the issue. So I want to, and I suggested on a show a couple of days ago, that I want to retire the concept of fair share. Because fair share ought not to be a conversation going forward. Because when the Team Unity administration dissolved, and the Charleston Accord became null and void, there is now no issue of fair share. So what I would like for my party to do going forward is for us to seek a reset. Let us start taking governance seriously, because what has happened is that we are in this predicament, and I recognize that one of the young persons would have used that word tonight, that we are in a predicament, and merely because all leaders up to this point have decided not to conform to the provisions that have been provided for us to be governed in St. Kitts and Nevis. Now the Constitution makes provisions for what we call revenue allocation. Nothing about fair share, it was no rancor involved in that. So, and the Constitution is the highest law of the land. Now, this is a document. The Constitution is the document which we need to look for guidance going forward. So I am seeking for us to get a reset. Let us start taking our oath seriously as politicians. When you take an oath to make sure that governance supersedes everything else, or good governance, then we would not, when the Constitution requires of Nevis to participate in a certain way, we would not go rogue of the requirements, and then instead of going back or seeking redress, we now want to create a framework for conducting the official business of state in an informal way, in forming these little cliques, these little groups, political groups, signing agreements that are not formal, and wherever, whether it's on the courthouse step or wherever. These things cannot. And I repeat, something like the Charleston Accord, and I don't know what other accord is coming, cannot supersede the Constitution. So let us go back to the provisions that have been made in section 110 that speaks to revenue allocation. And in that, Nevis would get the same proportion that people are now trying to insert in an informal way in what they call a Charleston Accord. Same thing, nothing different, is on a pro rata basis using the population. So proportionately, Nevis should get, based on the population, 25% of the revenue collected, and that is the consolidated amount that is between St. Kitts and Nevis. So everybody put their monies in the same pot. So this Constitution speaks to that. And so there would be no dispute. We are going to get out what is due to us. That is what the Constitution says. Now, the Constitution, that's in 110, which speaks to the allocation of revenue. So Nevis is in no doubt, you'll get your share. In 111, which comes right after 110, it speaks about grants and loans. Then after that, it comes to section 112, which speaks about dispute settlement. Now what that means is, if Nevis thinks that Nevis is not getting its fair share. The Constitution makes the provision for us to take it to the High Court and get it settled. Now, if we, and I'm just going to humor, Mr. Brand, as it relates to the fair share thing, and keep that in play for a little while. If we go to the Charleston Accord, where in there is the provision for dispute settlement? Did they anticipate that this relationship would last? Well, obviously they didn't. But still, the credibility is the issue. Because you're going to be, and they have been talking about trust amongst these players on the courthouse step. And it's about time that we move away from that. We need to move away from the informal, talking about the relationships, and let us hold fast to the provisions of the Constitution. So, if Nevis is not getting its fair share, and I will repeat, we can take it to the High Court and get the matter settled there. I'm even hearing people talking about, well, if we don't get our fair share, we go to 113, which speaks to the separation of Nevis from St. Kitts. No, why do we want to skip the provision that has been made for dispute settlement and go straight to separation? That doesn't make any sense. Permit me, Webbo, just to say one last thing on this issue. The timing. People are saying that we should all galvanize around this issue about fair share. I don't know which accord they're going to introduce this time, if it is the K-on accord. But for me, the issue is timing. And I've pointed that out. It's timing and it's credibility of the person who is stirring up the issue or making it an issue. Now let me use an analogy. Because I've heard analogies being made all the time using relationships between men and women as it relates to this fair share and the actions or inactions and stuff like that and how people should be reacting. And talking about collapse of government and all that. Government didn't have to collapse, but let me just proceed with my marriage relationship analogy. Well, if my mother were to say to our family, or the children rather, within that family, I am going to take you out of this house at a time when there's a alert out that there's a storm out there. Hurricane Irma is out there, and my mother says to us as the children, you know what? Your father has not been treating me fairly. He has not been giving me the amount of money that I should get, so I'm going to take you out in the storm. And I don't care, we're going to go out in the storm. Because I have a boyfriend out there, and he's homeless too. So all of us can be homeless, but we're going to be one family because I know that there's hope that things will change, and after the storm, or maybe during the storm, or whenever, I don't know yet, but life would be better for us. So I'm going to take you out into the storm. And the storm I'm talking about is the economic storm or the inflation storm that we are currently experiencing. This is not a good time for any leader to be causing not only disruptions in Nevis, but disruption in St. Kitts and Nevis. The timing is bad. And at the end, what are we likely to achieve? If you leave home, take your children out of a safe home, take them onto the streets, hook up with a homeless man, what is likely to become of your children who you care and love so much? After you would have lived in a relationship for 7 years taking care of your children, and you're going to tell me, just because, well, Christmas just gone, you guys had a grand time, money was flowing, but right in the dead of the storm, you take your children out. Now tell me, if that is conscionable, the timing is bad. The timing is bad. And also recognizing that Nevis has an election that is due within the same period of time, that is unconscionable. I cannot follow a leader like that. That is not a true leader representing the best interests of his people. I am not saying that Nevis shouldn't get its fair share. What I'm saying is let us do it the proper way. Let us go back to contributing to the pie and then taking our piece of the pie. That is what fair share ought to be about.
Let's see. Let me go to the lines. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Let me go to the lines. Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello?
You're on the air. You want to please listen to your telephone.
Yeah, I lock off the radio. I'm sorry for that. Listen, Dr. Bartlett, I want to ask something. If they did sign the thing in the what do you call it? Not the account. If they did sign the paper in law, right? Like with the fair share thing, because you look like the way you're talking, right? You look like you want to bad. You look like you want to blame Mark Grantley. That's the way you're talking. But listen to me. They signed the thing in agreement with Van Samuel. Mark Grantley wasn't it, but he do it. But Van Samuel, Timothy Harris, and Sean Richard. They never won yet. That was 2014. I was right in town. But the whole breaking up of the whole stuff now is just because the honesty of Timothy Harris. Timothy Harris he is not honest. So if he did do what the accord said, all in now the country would not in this turmoil. We would have been in a good situation, but he just play greedy and he just do what he want to do. And he take a man like Mark Grantley, right? Not Parry, not Vance. He take a man like Mark Grantley to come out and stand up for Nevis thing. So when you say it's nothing to do with fair share, yes, it's supposed to do with fair share. Not even a fair share, only 25%. So if he keep his bargain, right, the country would not be like this. So it's his fault, because I have a cousin in St. Kitts, and they sent a little clip to me, right, saying, he said that when Nevis want money for, and $1 to Nevis is $1 less to St. Kitts. What kind of man is that? So please, be fair, man. Because if NRP go in, right, he going to be in the same position. I think it's Nevis. And nothing to see with fight for the Nevis or nothing, but fear is fear. So that is what things. So don't talk about constitution, and if the thing was in the constitution, right, you say something right there. If it was in the constitution and it happened like this, you could have taken them to court and fight it in court and so. But you all would have still blame Mark Grantley. Anyway, I'm listening still, man. Continue. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to point out, having heard the opening comments of Dr. Bartlett and Mr. Brand, that the earlier panelists were right, because one expressed that this, ought to be the prevailing major issue, and then the other panelists said, I agree with that, but that's not happening. So the two panelists that I have are in concert with exactly that. So I just wanted to make that point. Secondly, the stuff that is in the Constitution, you said, Dr. Bartlett, you said that it's in the Constitution already about the fair share. That's correct?
Yes,
so,
well, it is.
So then we're only arguing about syntax then. What terminology to use, whether to use fair share or something else.
No. For me, it's not that.
No, but what I'm saying is, if the concept is there already, right, and you're agreeing with the concept and saying that it is not necessary then to talk about fair share, right? I'm saying then when we are saying then syntax is the problem. What structure of words we use, no?
Well, it's up to you if you want to characterize it that way. My point that I was trying to suggest is we are introducing now into the matrix something that did not previously exist.
Okay. And
I am not willing to accept that in lieu of what was there, which is revenue allocation cannot, for me, necessarily be replaced with just fair share, because a lot of people obviously not understanding it. A lot of people have latched on to fair share and the association with that language, with the Charleston Accord, because now the gentleman, he can speak to the fair share, but the Constitution, he has no idea what is going on inside the Constitution. And I have been appealing to Nevisians, or well, to all of us as Nevisians and Kittitians, to get a copy of the Constitution and read it. It is not that difficult. Just apply yourself and read it. You may not understand all of the language. It seems, fairly, simple. Maybe sometimes we mix miscontext and all that. But please, let us read it.
Okay, now, I know you're signaling, Mr. Bryan, I'll come to you in a second, but I just wanted to put this in, which also stemmed from the earlier discussion. The youths, or the persons who were on, were making the point that the persons who run for these political office, public offices, and what you should look for, and what you should or should not include. And I think one of the points that was discussed as to whether the personality or the character, credibility, and so on of the person is important. I think initially one or two persons might have said it shouldn't matter, but I think when we went into the discussion, we found out it should matter. And I think Dr. Bartlett had made a point about something about the credibility, right, of the person, and so you're agreeing with that. Let me take this call. Good evening, thank you for holding. Let me take this call. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, Webbo. The fair share, that is word, those are words, fair share. But it is the same concept. The Constitution speaks to a certain portion for Nevis, 25%, and 75% for Syndicate. So even though the new frame of mind and new coined word, fair share, is front and center, it is in the Constitution, and therefore let us go back to the Constitution and give Nevis its fair share.
You see, caller, I think you're in concert with the question I was asking, because it's just syntax, right? Exactly. If you said somebody, when I choose to refer to you, I say Edric W. Stanley. Brian prefers to say the super heavyweight, but it means the same thing, right?
It means the same thing.
Okay, all right.
And therefore, we need for them to follow the leader.
So maybe I should do this, because I like to see whether or not I can, bring things together or what. What if you think if we change the terminology, then we'll get everybody on the same?
No.
No, okay.
It will still, for whatever reason.
It will still, okay.
Afraid, simply because they want to believe, or give the impression, or give a certain amount of information to mislead. The Constitution speaks to the amount in terms of percentage, and therefore we have to look no place else but to the Constitution. If you want to forget the Charleston Accord, you forget it. But it's in the Constitution from 1983.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Mr. You wanted to...
I just wanted briefly...
Yes, go ahead.
Webbo, the reason why I'm trying not to continue to engage in this fair share argument is that what we may recognize at some point along is that 25 to 75 might not be fair. It is constitutionally mandated that 25 to 75 is what it is now. It has been worked out to be that. If circumstances change, we cannot hold fast to 25 and 75.
Yeah, but I don't...
If the population in Nevis... No, let me just finish. If the population in Nevis had to balloon for whatever reason, then 25 to 75 may not be fair. So we have to stick to what the Constitution says. It is revenue allocations. You have issues with that as it relates to dispute, then you can take it to the High Court. If it is that the population in Nevis gets to 50% and it's 50% in Sink, it's not likely, but I'm just saying if it does, then we make a case, and if it's not changed, But we cannot just hold fast to 25 and 75 and say that that is fair.
Yeah, but I don't know whether or not the issue of a number is part of the current issue or debate. What if then the leaders were to have gotten together and they had said, well, you know something, based on whatever statistics, fair would mean not 75-25, but 76-24. And they say, well, fine, that's okay. I don't know whether or not, as I listen to the debate or argument, I don't know whether or not a particular number yet is you know, the issue. Okay, but Mr. Brand, go ahead, because I promise you.
I want to ask Dr. Bartlett a question, if I may. Dr. Bartlett, do you consider the sale of St. Kitts and Nevis's passport as a tax? That it is a tax? Do you consider it as a tax?
I do not consider it as a tax, and the official budgeting process does not treat it as if it were a tax.
Good.
It is listed as a non-tax or non-tax revenue item.
Well, let me read what Section 1110 of the Constitution said. Subject to subsection 2, the proceeds of all taxes collected in St. Christopher and Nevis under any law shall be shared between the government and the administration, and the share of each shall be determined by reference to the proportion between the population of the island of St. Christopher and Nevis. We are not talking about tax, Dr. Bartlett. Right? No. Hold on. I sat here and I listened to you. We are not talking about tax. The people of Nevis is not asking for the taxes that are collected on St. Kitts to be shared with Nevis. I want us to put that simple mechanism aside. The Constitution specifically speaks about taxes collected in St. Kitts and Nevis. What we are talking about, and I want to make it pellucidly clear, what we are talking about is the proceeds from the citizenship by investment in St. Kitts and Nevis. That is what we are talking about. That is what we are asking and demanding for the people of Nevis to get its fair share. My passport said to me, St. Christopher, St. Kitts and Nevis. When Canada said to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis that you are going to have to get a visa to come to Canada, they didn't say that St. Kitts must do it and not Nevis. And that is the simple argument that we are saying, Dr. Bad. We are not talking about tax. The Constitution gives a provision about the tax collected in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. The Charlestown Accord specifically speak about the proceeds from the citizenship by investment that should be shared between St. Kitts and Nevis on a pro rata basis. I don't see why that should be so much of a contentious issue. That is what we are talking about. We are not talking about what is in the Constitution and what is budgeted and so. We are talking about a specific income that is coming into the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are talking about the proceeds from the passport of St. Christopher and Nevis. That is what we are talking about. And if there is any doubt in anyone's mind, the people of Nevis is not after the taxes that is being generated on St. Kitts. I mean, that we can have that discussion as well, because there is a lot of businesses that are doing business on Nevis that are paying the taxes on St. Kitts. We can have that conversation. But we are not at that stage. We are specifically, Dr. Bartlett and listeners, speaking about the proceeds from the citizenship by investment that all political parties that sign on to the Charlestown Accord agreed that Nevis would get their share based on a pro rata basis. I don't know how much clearer anybody can make it.
Let me ask this question, Mr. Brand.
Yes.
All political parties that signed on to that Charlestown Accord.
Yes.
Do we know of whether or not the view of the other political parties that did not sign on to that, do we know whether or not they are in agreement as to whether or not Nevis should get anything out of that money?
I am not aware that they would have voiced their position on that.
You know, but that will be interesting for the nation to find out. But you don't have to really ask. Well, you ask them to hear what they say, but the evidence will show whether or not, by performance, when they had the opportunity, their performance or their actions suggested that they do agree. But that's also important as well, because the reason why I made that point is because I wanted to bring a wholesome discussion on this thing, because there are a lot of possibilities that can happen next time around.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yes.
The other, sorry.
Sorry, if I may, I just wanted to move on just to respond to what Mr. Brand said. Mr. Brand, I don't know if you're aware of the circumstances prior to 1983 and what would have been the state of affairs in St. Kitts and Nevis and what we had to sell in common, if indeed we had anything to sell in common at that point in time. So the issue that has arisen is, how do we treat with a joint asset? And that did not require any rancor. That did not require an agreement outside of the Constitution that, like you already pointed out, it's deficient in itself, because all of the political parties representing the people were not even involved in that. What I'm saying is, to treat with that, we could have made amendments, which we have not done anything meaningful up to this point. We have not touched the Constitution, but we could have made amendments to cater for that. And that is why we send people to Parliament. That is why we elect representatives from Nevis to go to St. Kitts to participate at that level, so we can get to those issues. We could be represented properly on those issues, because we have sent lawyers. Our lawyers up to this point would have recognized the deficiencies, recognizing that prior to 1983 we had very little in common that we had to sell to be quarreling about. This is a circumstance that happened after. But there's nothing to prohibit us from bringing into law or to take, or at least be proposing amendments to the Constitution to reflect the non-tax revenues that rightly belong to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So you're not going to get any argument from me as to whether or not we're entitled to that, because we know what happens tomorrow if the CBI is non-existent. Then the argument dies. What happens if they start selling at that one point, some politician decided he could sell people? What if he started to sell the people of St. Kitts and Nevis? How do we treat those revenues that come in?
Okay, let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good night, all.
Good evening. Yes, good evening.
Yes, good night. Mr. Brand.
Yes, sir.
Can I put a question to Mr. Brand?
Go ahead, please.
How does Mr. Brand and the CCM know the amount which is in the CBI?
How we know what is the amount?
Yes.
We were able.
If you're wanting a fair share, would you not have to know how much is in the CBI to determine whether you're getting a fair share or not?
But caller, some of those figures were published in various budgets. Up to last year in 2020, we were told that some $500+ million came into the federation. So there are some figures that are have been published.
Okay, so that's
did how much of the figures that have been published did the Nevis Island administration get?
Well, last year, over $500+ million came into the CBI, into the Federation. Nevis was able to get $45 million from that. Way short of anything that close to what we should be getting.
Caller, by way of information, I heard the Premier once say, based on the totality of everything and what Nevis had gotten so far, it equated to about 7%.
7%.
But Dr. Bartlett has made a good point that since 1983 there has been no amendments to the provisions of 1110.
Yeah.
There have been no provision made to the Constitution in its entirety. Not only 1110.
Yeah, but let me ask this question. Let me ask
110, sorry.
Let me ask this question. So, the fact that you owe me something and you would not pay me because I didn't tell you how much I collect. It gives, and so because I don't know, it gives you the right not to give me?
Repeat the question.
So, if you were collecting something for me on behalf of me, you and myself, right? And you were the one who were collecting, let's say we had a dance, and you were the gate collector, and you were supposed to give me half of what you collect. So, the fact that I did not know exactly how much you collect, and were not able to tell you that I am supposed to get $50, that gives you the right not to give me any?
But the last word you said is any, but you've got some.
No, walk with me. Walk with me. So, does it give you the right not to give me any?
It gives you the right to proclaim and to state how much more you should get.
Okay. So, does it not put the burden also on you to be honest and say, well, I collected $100 and therefore there is 50?
If you're a member of parliament,
no, walk with me. No, walk. No, we're not. Wait, walk with me. We out of. No, walk with me. Walk with me, caller. Walk with me. We're out of parliament. In my example, we're out of parliament.
Yes.
I ask you the question: if you and I are in a partnership, in a dance, we're keeping a dance, and based on what the collections are, you have the responsibility of collecting and giving me my portion. Because I was not there, for whatever reason, I do not know how much you collect. Then you have the right, or you should not give me what is my fair share, or whatever my share is.
You cannot prove that you have not had a fair share.
No. I'm asking you, is it not incumbent on you to be honest and say to me then, Webbo, the dance proceed was $100. Based on the discussion or the arrangement, your amount is 50. Here's your 50.
The case that they're making out is that they have not had a fair share. But they have not proved...
What I want you to do first, caller, is to answer the question in my scenario that I ask you.
Your scenario, if I answer the question in your scenario, you will say that...
Caller, let me ask you a question.
No, hold on, Mr. Brand. Hold on. Let me caller walk with me. Go ahead, caller.
If I answer the question in the example you have put, you're going to turn around that answer against me to prove your case that they've had their fair share.
I think that is our light moment for the night, caller. I got you. Okay. Okay. Now, quickly, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask a question based on the discussion earlier. And I promised the young folks maybe we can get them back in because I think it was an important discussion. But one of the things, and I had mentioned it earlier, and I think Dr. Bartlett had made a point on it, a view on it in terms of the character and of the persons who are represented. It is fair game to look at that. Mr. Brand, Dr. Bartlett said it. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Okay.
Let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, Webbo. That caller, the last caller, had his lawyer's hat on, and therefore just didn't want to accept the fact that you have given him all the factual information, and consequently, he didn't want to go down the road where he should have gone.
And can I?
You're boxed in down there. Anyhow.
But before you go on to something else, and you said the lawyer had the lawyer's hat on, and
exactly.
Walk with me, and the judges in the other studio had the judge's coat on.
That is correct.
Go ahead, caller. Go ahead.
So, what I'm saying is that it is very simple, and it is simple mathematics. The information is out there, it's been published. The passport sale is a product of the gross national product of St. Kitts Nevis, from which we should get our fair share. Anything that is produced in St. Kitts Nevis brings in revenue. We must get our fair share. And the numbers are there, 588 million, based on mathematics. It is simple. Roughly 150 million belongs to us. And nobody's going to hoodwink us.
Okay. All right.
Can I make one statement? I just want Mr. Brand to know, and for his CCM party to know, that Nevisions, I think, collectively we are in favor of Nevis getting, and I'll use it loosely, the fair share. They have won the debate. They have won, and I want them to know, they have won the debate in the court of public opinion, but it is not going to produce any monies for Nevis. In order for us to be able to have a settlement that is sustainable, we're going to have to take it to the High Court. If we seek to get a reset, in that we go to whomever is elected this time around and say, look, we are ready to return, and this is one amendment we were going to seek to have. That is indeed if we are significant players this time around, because we may not even be significant players this time around to be demanding anything. But if we were to be placed in that position, then I think we should start negotiating on behalf of Nevisions in a formal way. This is what we would want to propose, an amendment to the Constitution to include non-tax revenue, and if we don't get it, we're going to head to the High Court. And there is where we expect the settlement or the dispute settlement to take place. Not in the court of public opinion. You cuss about it, you mash up a whole government about it, and then at the end of the day, all Nevisions still suffer. We're not any better off.
But isn't it, in terms of procedure though, you first have to get the win or the support in the court of public opinion, which means you get the seats, you get the representation, you get the agreement, you get the monies, and then you said thereafter now you sign the thing into law, and then you do it that way. How about that? Let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding. You have half a minute.
We are honorable people, and we call the elected leaders honorable men and women, and therefore they're supposed to operate honorably and don't look for ways to duck into rabbit holes. Therefore, Nevis must get its full share, and we are looking for it. We don't have to go to any court. We shouldn't have to go to any court once we deal with honorable people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, here's what we're going to do. Final comment, Dr. Bartlett.
I would just like to at least try to help out the group, I think the group of young people. I'm not so sure what the formal name is.
Dirty your finger.
Dirty your finger, right? There's a Dirty Your Finger campaign, and I would like to extend an invitation to all young people to, as much as they can, support this drive. Get involved, go get registered, because you cannot dirty your finger unless you get registered. You cannot make any input in what is going on in St. Kitts Nevis or shape your direction unless you get involved.
Mr. Brand?
Webbo, I am indeed delighted to hear Dr. Bartlett tonight say that the Nevis Reformation Party is supportive of the CCM in this fight for Nevis's fair share. That is certainly a wonderful position for the whole of Nevis to hear tonight, that the NRP is supporting CCM on that issue. I also believe, Webbo, that...
But I didn't say that, just for the record. That's not what I said.
Unless
Do
I'm
not speak for
unless
me.
I am misquoting you?
You misquoting me. Speak for yourself.
Well,
I'm not supporting your no issue. I'm supporting the issues of Nevis. And it's not, CCM is not your issue.
Okay.
Well, Webbo,
Yeah.
as I was saying, I am really happy to hear what I heard tonight. If I have misquoted Dr. Bartlett, I apologize.
You deliberately did.
That's okay. You all can go back to the YouTube
Yeah.
a minute after and have it rectified. Anyway, this program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On Demand. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
Views and opinions expressed by the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the